Welcome to Kratom Sobriety. Today we are with Dan, whose son Austin died at the age of 25 in December. Our podcast is mostly dedicated to helping people overcome Kratom addiction, but we also want to spread awareness about the potential risks of Kratom consumption. While safer than street drugs, traditional, or even alcohol, it is possible to die from Kratom toxicity, despite all the claims from the industry, lobbyists, and advocates. Thanks for being with us today. I wish it was under different circumstances. My son has just graduated from high school, the class of 2024. So hearing about Austin's passing really hit home for me as a father. And thanks for being here today.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me on to help tell Austin's story and spread awareness.
What was Austin like growing up?
Austin was like any other kid, I think. He was into sports. He played baseball, played football up until middle school. Very caring, kind, good to his friends. He was funny, just usually a joy to have around. That's basically the gist of it, just like any other normal kid.
What was his favorite hobby, do you think?
Gaming and collecting Pokemon cards.
All
He
right.
loved his Pokemon cards and playing Modern Warfare, and he loved the Maddens. And he was anticipating the new NCAA football game that just came out, and of
Oh,
course he didn't make it to see that, but he was there hasn't been one since 2004, I believe, and he was telling me last year, "Hey, Dad, this going to come out with a new NCAA football game." And he had gotten to an age where we started having a lot more stuff in common, where as far as musical interest and just different other things. So I felt like we were bonding more as he got older.
since my son is out of high school, he's growing up really quickly. So when they become adults, it is a different stage. Looking back, what makes you most proud of Austin?
I'm most proud of, there's so many things just looking back, is respectfulness, caring of others, kindness. He enjoyed helping others, had a tremendous amount of compassion for others, less fortunate. He would go above and beyond to help friends. He actually, and I didn't know the extent of some of this until after the passing, that he spent a lot of time taking food and different items to food pantries and just really loved helping the less fortunate, helping others. He taught me a lot about humility and l- trying to judge people and label people. I've just been one of those people who, if I see something, I call it for what it is. And Dad, you don't know him. Why would you say that? I'm like, because I know of him. And he's like, no, you don't know. He didn't judge people. He didn't care if you were white, black, gay, straight, transgender. He did not care. If he liked you and you were good to him, he didn't judge. The guy on the street corner, he didn't, the recovering addict, the current addict, he didn't judge anyone. And like I said, sometimes I just see stuff for what it is, and he would call me and say, "No, that's not right." Just because it looks that way, and that's you don't know that's how he was. I was proud of him too. He was musically talented, and we actually, one of the songs that he wrote, we had it at his funeral for one of the main songs that they played, as well as a cover song that he did. So he was really into music and writing and things like that. I don't think he took himself serious enough. And it's sad. It's just how life goes. But we didn't even really see that much of it until afterwards. And then we started looking at his songs and looking at different stuff, and just we thought, man, he didn't. I wish we would have seen that more, or he would have exploited that more. But just there were just so many things we were proud of him about.
It's a lot to appreciate there. When did Austin start taking Kratom and what was that like?
It was around August or so of 23, and I still remember we were just sitting in the car, and he started telling me about kratom, and he vaped and stuff like most other kids. I don't know, I shouldn't say most, but it seems like the majority of kids vape or do
Yeah.
something.
Yes.
At the smoke shop, the local vape shop, he said, "Dad, there's this stuff called kratom, and it's a naturally occurring herb from Asia." And he had done his research on this stuff, and He said it helps with get energy. It just makes you really more focused. And he said it can help. Sometimes my back hurts a little bit, and he said it's supposed to help that anxiety. It's a miracle drug. And so I said, "Is it harmful? Can it hurt?" He said, "No." He said, I've researched it." He said, "It's at the down at the smoke shop over the counter." And he said, there are capsules." And I said, "If you think it'll help you and it's not going to hurt you or nothing." And he said, "No." I said, "Okay." So he starts taking the capsules and the powder in the capsule form. And time passes, and I talked to him a couple times, just trying to touch base with him. And I say, "Austin, how's this working? Is it seems like that your upticks a little bit more on it than I remember?" And he said, "Yeah, I, I think it's helping me. It does help me with. I feel like I got more energy and stuff." And I said, "Do you feel like that it's addictive? Is it supposed to be addictive?" And I do think that am starting to get a little addicted to it because I've noticed that it doesn't do anything if I just take a couple capsules, and I do think I'm addicted, starting to get addicted to it. I thought it's probably time for you to quit that. Maybe it's not as safe as what they're saying it is, and you probably need to stop." And he says, "I'm going to." He says, "I've got what's left of the rest of this bag of whatever they came in 20, I think." And he said, "I'm going to do this." And he said, "I'm not going to do it anymore." I said, "Okay, good." But he didn't. And for whatever reason, I don't know if maybe I want to say that maybe he quit taking them for a while. And then I think he had some withdrawals from them. And then so he started taking them again. It just continued that way. And a couple times between August and December, same thing. I would talk to him and say, "What do you it seems like that you're still taking this stuff. And what's it doing to you? Do you have any kind of effects or anything?" And he says, "No." He said, "It feels like it helps me, but I am taking more than I did." And I said, "I told you, you need to quit doing this because you're addicted to it." And he says, "Yeah, it's not supposed to be addictive," but he said it is addictive. And he said, I think I have." And all the way up to through December, I didn't see any sign other than the fact that when he'd get in the car with me or we'd go someplace, he would have them with him and he would take a couple. And sometimes we would go to the smoke shop and he'd go in and buy them. Never thought anything about it other than asking him, "Are you sure this stuff is safe?" "Yes, I've researched it. Basically, people take it and it's fine." We go all the way through up through December.
Sounds like he was experiencing tolerance, which is very
Yeah,
common. I personally experienced that, and almost everybody we've had on the podcast. It just you need to take more to get the same effects, and then as you witnessed,
that's
sometimes
not what that's not what the AKA says.
yes. Did he always take the same kind of product, or did he differ his product?
He started with the powder capsules, and then he started doing the extracts. And I think that's probably where the trouble started when he started doing those extracts because as they're much, much more potent and powerful than the capsules. The bottles, I think it's criminal. I truly believe it's criminal. I don't care if it's not regulated, but I don't care. I don't know how you can sell something and not say, "Don't take more than 2 bottles, don't take more than 1 bottle, don't take whatever," or you could have adverse reactions such as seizures, coma, death. How is that not criminal? So he's taking that and then the powder, the capsules, and the extracts. He didn't like the plain powder by itself. He didn't seem to care for that, but he liked the capsules, and then he really got into the kratom extracts.
The extracts, you don't have to take in as much plant matter, and they're a little bit more convenient, but they're way more potent and have a way more addictive profile. And because they have a higher concentration of the alkaloids in kratom, it's way more riskier than a capsule. And how much he was taking every day?
I don't know. I don't know what he was doing in the extracts. We would find like in the car, we would find a bottle of the extracts or in his room. And so I just looked at him and thought this and read the bottle and say kratom. I'm like, it's just something that I didn't know anything about and just tossed it aside and thought, it's just another kind of kratom, whatever. And he wasn't showing any signs of, because Austin he would tell us. If he would come up if something was wrong, he would say, "I don't feel right." And so he wasn't experiencing any of that stuff because he would tell us,
Yeah.
because he would be scared. He would say, I'm dizzy, I don't feel right, something's not right here. But he never did any of that stuff. Never told us anything about having any issues.
It's great that he wasn't hiding it from you, and he was really only taking it for 5 months. Did he, before we talk about the horrible day you found him, did he have any health conditions?
He didn't have any kind of pre-existing conditions as far as any kind of health. He was no physical problems as far as any heart issues, no lungs or anything like that we're aware of. He was a healthy 25-year-old kid. He didn't have any of that stuff. As far as we know, there were no pre-existing conditions. There was nothing on the autopsy. There was nothing that said anything about an underlying heart condition or anything about cardiac issues or anything like that. And we were actually expecting that because we all thought he had some kind of a rare heart attack or maybe like an aneurysm or something. That's what we totally expected. We thought it's just some rare issue, and no, that's not what it was.
Why don't you tell about that day in December? I'm avoiding it. I didn't mean to laugh, but because it's sad. So why don't you tell folks
Yeah.
what happened?
So I work from home after COVID 3 days a week, office employee. So we work telework from home. And Tuesday morning, he texted me from work and he said, I had my eval. He said, I was scared. He said, because she just pulled me in the office. And he said, it scared me because I thought, what'd she pull me in the office for? She told me he was doing great. She said he exceeded all of his goals that he had. And he were just joking. He said, maybe I'll get a raise. And I said, you probably will soon. And just a normal day. We talking about Christmas some more. Hey, he was just like a kid. He asked for his stuff for Christmas. We'd hide it and wrap it up and all that kind of stuff. And he was telling me about Christmas and what he was looking at and showed me a couple clothing. He was really big into the newest, latest, most expensive clothing and hats and shirts and pants and stuff. And he said, which one of these you like best? Sadly, just probably a week after this all happened, we were getting packages in the mail. And that was a difficult time. But so that day we talk and he comes home from work, or he came home from work that day. And he comes home and he's just like a normal day. He's talking, we're laughing, he's playing with his dogs, and he's asking about food. What are we going to have for dinner? And we talked about that. And he had dinner, which we'd have talked more to him that night. He got his dinner. He had, I think they were Chinese General Tso's chicken or something, and put him in the air fryer. And he took him downstairs and he said something like, you don't get none of these or something. We took him. And that was the last time we saw him. Unfortunately, he went downstairs, which is where his bedroom was. And we didn't hear anything else. So the next morning, my wife went to work at 7, and I got up and started working and just walked into the kitchen and looked outside, and his car was sitting outside. I said, what's his car outside for? He's overslept today or something. And so I walked downstairs and look into his room, and he's just face down in the floor. And it still hadn't hit me. I didn't know what had happened. I thought, what's going on? He passed out or something?
Yeah.
And so I go over and I grab him and rolled him over. And it was just a blur from there. I just remember rolling him over and he was stiff and he had turned purple. And I knew at that point that there was nothing I could do. I knew he had been there for a long time. Probably sometime that night it had happened. He had just passed out and then it had happened. So I just zoned out for a while and just yelled and talked to him and shook him. And even though I knew that there was nothing I could do, I just still kept just shook him. And then I just started dialing numbers on the phone. And there were people calling me that evening saying, like, why did you call me this morning?
Yeah.
I was just dialing stuff. I didn't even know what I was even doing. And so I called my wife and she came home. And then of course I called 911 and they came over. And They came in, the police officers came in, the chief investigator, and they came in and they talked to me. They go in and they looked at him, and of course they take pictures and all that stuff, and they talked to me and asked me if I knew anything, what had happened and stuff. And I said no. I said he's not on anything. And they said okay. So they were just based on what had happened. They started treating it as like an OD, just because of the looks of it. I said the only thing that he takes is Kratom. And one of the officers looked at him and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "You guys don't even know what Kratom is?" He's like, "No, what is it?" I said, it's stuff that they sell down here at the smoke shop and most of the other smoke shops around, that it's a new thing that people are taking." And I said, "It's just over the counter and it's just like an herb." And they said, "Oh, okay." They do their thing and we all talking and they basically take him and leave. So they did the toxicology stuff and they did the mouth swab and all that kind of stuff. And they told me that they would let me know the results.
Did they try, since they thought it was a potential overdose, did they administer Narcan?
They did not, because it was obvious that he had been there. He had been there for a long time. And that's one of the things that really stick with me, and it will forever. I'll never forget that mental picture, because I knew that there was nothing that anyone could do. He had been there for a long time.
My son goes up to his room and he's a gamer. He works long hours sometimes too, but I don't hear from him for long periods of time and it's just normal. So
Yes.
I know that must be a difficult thing to but that's the course of young men. They sleep long periods of time.
Yep.
They want to be by themselves. they don't want to be pestered.
It's very difficult. Even though I try to tell myself that and everyone tells me that, it's still, because you're like, man, what if I just needed to ask him a question and I'd
Yeah.
walk down there and say this had just happened or it just had happened recently and I could have changed there. I could have changed it. Or if he would have felt something and he would have yelled or he would have called us or we would have heard him hitting the wall or walking up the steps or something. But it's something I truly believe, just based on me personally reading through the autopsy and reading through everything. I wish part of me wishes I hadn't have read as much as I did, because it's graphic in autopsy reports. But this appears to me that he didn't see this coming, and that he just basically collapsed, went unconscious. And I truly believe that it was respiratory depression, and that's it. Because there was nothing heart related. It didn't say anything about cardiac arrest. It didn't say the heart was enlarged. It said nothing about anything like that. It said that it said asphyxia, and it said that there was some pulmonary edema. So when you sit there and you think about that stuff and you tell yourself he may have laid there for an hour, 2 hours, and I don't know this. It's possible he could have laid there for an hour, 2 hours, and been breathing and just finally stopped breathing. I would like to believe that there was nothing anyone could have done if I would have went down there at that exact moment, because I know that I've read some incidences where that is the case, where it happens right in front of them and they try to do stuff and there's nothing they can do. Maybe that is what happened. I don't know. But I'm never going to be able to get over the fact that maybe it wasn't, because that's another thing that you hear from the AKA and all these advocacy groups, is it doesn't cause respiratory depression. Yes, it does. It absolutely 100% does. It's statistically proven that it does. Is it on the level as true opioids? I don't think so, but I think that's where they mislead people. Is they say that it doesn't cause respiratory depression and all that stuff because it's a partial agonist. It still causes it, just not like fentanyl or something, but it still does cause it, and I'm living proof to show that it does. It's 100% factual. It's in everything that we have, that we got, the autopsy, the toxicology report. It's all in there. It was the sole cause of death was Mitragynine toxicity. It's just very aggravating to know that the false propaganda and all the false rhetoric and the false All that stuff's out there, and it's just not true.
I say, even if it is relatively safer than other things that somebody can consume, and the statistics are lower for you and your family, it's 100% deadly. And so, even though you have no solace that it's, I'm making this up, 90% safer than fentanyl. But so it sounds like you got two different reports. One was an autopsy and one was a toxicology report. What was in the official findings of the autopsy?
The official autopsy findings were mitragynine. The report said, it is my opinion, that Austin's cause of death was mitragynine toxicity. And that's what it said. It said that a lethal amount of mitragynine was ingested over a period of several days. So it's not something like that day where he just took too much. This is something that occurred over a period of time and gradually happened. And it built up in his system over time, and it was to the level where it was just too much in his system.
So it sounds like that was informed by a toxicology report. So they
Yeah.
waited to make the autopsy finding. What did the toxicology report? Did they give you specific like blood concentration levels and things like that in the report?
They did. The toxic See, I'm in a small town of probably about 12, 13, 14,000 people. When the toxicology when they did the toxicology, they sent it off to Montgomery County and Dayton, and then it comes back. And when it came back, I was called by, I believe it was the chief investigator. I believe that's who it was. And he says, "I'm sorry." He said, there's nothing in his blood. He doesn't have any drugs in it. And so we knew that there wouldn't be any drugs in it because he wasn't doing any drugs. They said, and I said, "Does that test for kratom?" Once again, he says, "What's kratom?" It's just not something that we just don't have in this area or whatever. And apparently he hadn't really heard a lot about it. He says, "I'm not really familiar with that." And so he said, "I'm sorry." He said, "There's nothing in his bloodstream." So he said, "We're going to have to send him off for an autopsy." And so our autopsies are done in Dayton, Ohio, in Montgomery County. And this took 8, 9, 10 weeks
Okay.
because what they had to do was, I don't know I don't know why they don't already do this, but they actually had to do these tests for kratom. It was a special test that they had to do. And they did that one, and then they did one for tinapede, the one that's in the stuff,
Yes.
so both of those tests, they ran those, and they said that's what took longer, where they had to do those specifically, and it all came back negative except for my tragedy.
They send it off to a special lab, an expert lab.
Yeah. So when you asked me the mass spectrum, that was performed, yes. So they did do that for the test.
And they did a standard panel for other
Yep.
fentanyl
Yep.
and other substances.
I believe it said like a 49 or 50 some drug panel. And this coroner in Ohio does 50% of Ohio's testing in Montgomery County and Dayton, Ohio. This medical examiner, I looked the guy up, very high, lots and lots of years. I want to say at least maybe 30 years he'd been doing as a medical examiner. He's had all kinds of different roles all over the state. It's not like this guy is somebody new or someone who's incompetent. Very high education and experience in what he does. So I don't feel, or I don't believe that anything was incorrect, anything was wrong, I don't think he missed anything. Very thorough going through the whole autopsy. Basically he every test was negative. Every test for the size of the heart, the size of the organs and all that stuff was all normal, other than the pulmonary edema, that's what happens when someone typically overdoses, and then they have the respiratory depression and the lungs start filling with fluid, and then they don't breathe anymore.
And we talked ahead of time, and there wasn't even any caffeine or nicotine, and he wasn't on any kind of prescriptions from a doctor. So
He wasn't taking anything from a doctor. It's just like probably every other kid that age, they go to the doctor and they get prescribed stuff and they don't take it. But as far as being on anything that he took every day, there's nothing I'm aware of.
Have you experienced any backlash online talking about Austin's story?
Only what I have basically pushed myself, because where I do live in a smaller community, the outpouring of support was astronomical. There were a couple whispers of people that are on Kratom in my town saying I take that and I've never had any issues with that, but no one actually coming out and actually calling me out and saying that's not, no, that's not, that didn't happen. I've actually, it's been the opposite in where I live. Is I know of a woman who was on heroin, and she went and started taking Kratom to help with the withdrawals from heroin. When she heard Austin's story, she immediately checked herself into a rehab for Kratom because she was so scared because of his story. And I've had several people come up and say, "You don't understand how many people you've reached, what you're doing." He said, "But people are hearing this, and there's a lot of people are really scared that are taking Kratom and they didn't know this stuff." Once again, bottles would have something on them that says, "Attention, do not take more than half of this. Do not take more than this, or this will happen." Basically, the bottles say nothing about anything. There's the capsules, which are earth kratom or the powder that he had, it says something on the back, and that for me personally, just don't get it. It says something like disclaimer, manufacturer, retailer, vendor, blah, 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 are not responsible for any adverse reactions which may occur from the consumption. What effects? What are they? Diarrhea, headache? What are they? That's not going to keep no average person from consuming this stuff. If you tell me what they are. What are you talking about? You're not telling me this could be toxic. You're just saying it's like any other thing you pick up. We're not basically responsible for this. Which, if you tell people what could happen, then they're probably not going to take it, or if they do, they're not going to take it in that amount. Austin was very intelligent, and he researched this a lot. He saw the same stuff we all did. Basically, the AKA, because you see a lot more AKA and advocacy groups than you do the other groups. And he saw the same stuff we all do. No one dies from kratom, and even on AKA's own website, where they had said something to the effect of kratom cannot, basically it can't kill you. There's no amount of kratom that can kill you alone. He saw all that stuff. How is that not criminal? When you got someone who reads and researches this stuff and it says all this stuff, and he just took it and just thought this is not going to. And it's so sad because the kid had no. He had no. I don't feel like he had any warning or anything. I just, because everything was normal. Like I said, we were talking about a normal day. Everything was normal. He placed orders online that same day for stuff in the mail, and he had absolutely no clue. This just hit him.
Yeah. It's a big industry. It's for profit. They want their product. They want to actually have a special carve out, like to be exempt from product liability on basic customer protections and like self-regulate. And very convinced it's like a food, that it's like a matcha tea,
It's in the
and
coffee family.
a coffee
Yeah,
family. It should
yeah.
be regulated like that. And they can't even educate people properly because it might not be a true opiate. It does interact with your opioid receptors. We can't even talk about that because they want to say breast milk. And people who buy this for the first time, they're very misinformed. They're not able to make an adult decision with the full array of information. I imagine, like, at the very least, at the point of sale, you should go through on the computer screen. It's like when you're at a pharmacy and it says, one, there's a risk of death for some people when you take this. Do not take this if you're on any over the counter medications or prescriptions. Do not take extracts because they're high concentrate. At the very least, you should do that, but we can't even get to that. because
Right.
the industry denies that there's any harms, that it's just buyer beware. A 25-year-old kid has to just read in between all the Reddit posts to get the truth out because the industry won't be honest. Obviously, it's a lot safer than fentanyl, but this is an over-counter thing that you just buy in the corner. I feel it's a little bit like sheep's,
It is.
like a wolf in sheep's. I don't know what the analogy is, but it's mismarketed.
What's really sickening about it is not potent as fentanyl, obviously, but the flip side of that is when someone takes fentanyl, they know what they're taking.
Yes.
They know what they're taking. In some ways, if you got this, so you got the people who take the fentanyl. They typically do it around other people because if they OD, they got their Narcan. When you In some ways, you look at it, those people are being Narcaned and they're not dying because they know the dangers. So they have Narcan and they have people around them. And in this case, they don't even know what's coming. They don't. He's in the basement all by himself. If you have any thoughts or anything that I feel off, something's not right, you're not going to sit in the basement by yourself. And so that's what makes me most furious is my son researched this stuff. And
Yeah.
I had his password and stuff to his phone and I went and I wanted to see what he did that day and for weeks and months or whatever. He researched Kratom. He wanted to see if it was safe. He wanted to see and he saw the same stuff that we saw. He saw the few stories out there that this happened to my son, or people can overdose if they have other opioids, other substances in their system. He's thinking, how
He,
much what can I take? Can I take all I want? They say I can. They say it can't kill me. And it's, I don't know. I just can't imagine if someone had a lawsuit and they went to trial. I can't imagine a jury finding against the plaintiff. And I don't know. If I'm on a jury of 12 people and I hear this story, I just can't imagine them saying that you shouldn't have took it or it's not the manufacturer's fault or whoever. I don't know. I can't imagine.
I think it would be better for the industry to just be honest about the risks and create a regulatory scheme that protects the public more rather than this like massive denial that there's any harm. So a couple things we can wrap up, but I know you're in a state that at one point I think proposed banning that. And I know
Yes.
that's a painful thing. You imagine a world, what would have happened if that succeeded in your state? When we acknowledge that there might have been on the flip side, there might be some unintended consequences to a law like that. Maybe somebody would have got arrested for having possession of kratom and there was some police brutality and then they died in a hypothetical arrest about that. And we don't want to impose that on a family, but we're talking about you, which is a real life happened to your family. You've mentioned it to before. What are your feelings about that?
There was something, like you said, it was the pharmacy board. They basically implemented this law or whatever you want to call it, and it was going to make kratom a controlled substance or a Schedule 1 substance. And went through and they had all the signatures, and then the AKA came in and totally floored it. So that's how much clout that they have, and they died. If that would have been pushed through, my son would still be here, 100% certainty. He would still be here. I feel that at minimum that it has to be regulated. They have to start labeling this stuff and not putting may cause adverse reactions. Well, what are they and how much can you take? How much should you take? What are the recommended dosing for this? I do believe that there may be some health benefit to taking, but it has to have some regulation and some kind of controls around it and not just be because the bottom line is you don't take stuff for no reason. Take the stuff because it helps whatever you're dealing with, whether it's depression, anxiety, pain, whatever. People are not taking this because it tastes good. Don't come here with all this misinformation and tell us that it's just a normal, naturally occurring herb from Southeast Asia and it just gives you energy. It's no, you take it because it helps whatever you're dealing with. It's not because it's just. I think they've compared it more so to morphine. And I don't know if you have seen these studies about the whole Narcan thing, but I have seen studies that there have been scenarios where someone has overdosed from kratom and they've used Narcan and it has worked. It just like a traditional opioid. It has worked and it has been effective. But to the best of my knowledge, the last recent studies that I had seen, there wasn't enough data on it and enough cases or whatever, but there are cases where it does work. So that's evidence of this working on the same receptors as opioids. It causes the same issues. It causes respiratory depression. It causes a lot of the same things as normal opioids do. Just the stuff that they're putting out, it's just not. It's just not. It's
Yeah.
just not factual. It's not true.
I have seen those several case studies where some patients were revived with Narcan and then they tested, they were totally free of any other opioids. And in general, it sounds like the scientists accept that there's a less respiratory arrest
Right.
profile, but there is mixed science there. And sometimes, and all this is mostly in animal studies, and animal
Right.
studies don't translate to humans in a total 100% way. I have to admit that this is a little bit above my pay level. I'm not a scientist, but I can
Right.
read Google Scholar
Yeah.
and it's not as a rosy picture and as risk free as the industry demands or the advocates claim. There's a logical fallacy where they can attribute it doing good, that it's such a miracle plant that it can do these positive things, but it's always never does any bad things. Or if it does any bad things, it's minor. And
Right.
it's a real logical fallacy. If it's powerful enough to cure this stuff, then it's powerful to have really consequential negative effects. And if you do read the Google Scholar, it's in the science. They'll claim that it's case studies and follow the science is their mantra. But if you follow the science, it's really mixed, especially if you exclude the scientists that aren't paid by the industry. The tobacco industry, they paid scientists to paint their substance for years in a much better light. And there's some of that going on with Kratom. And because it's such a small niche industry right now, they're getting away with it. If you can know that if a senator's son in your state died, there would be action on
Oh,
this
absolutely.
substance. I'm pretty progressive. I'm pretty liberal. Both of us grew up in the 70s.
Yeah.
It's not like we're drug war enthusiasts that want to tell everybody not to do drugs, but we don't want our kids to die from it. And it's not like we're hysterical about it. It's not like we're making this up. You are a real world person. You have no reason to blame Kratom other than it was on the autopsy report of your deceased son. A couple more questions. I know you want to educate other families. What kind of messages do you want to tell other families?
The messages that I try to relay all the time on Facebook and the social media and all of this stuff where I see people saying, I've done this, stop saying this. And this is the only time where I have had some clashes with people where I say, listen, I know firsthand about this. And usually they'll say, oh, stop. People will comment and say, no, you blah, blah, blah. I'm like, listen, I have no reason to tell you this. I don't have, it's not like I live to sit here and try to reply to your comments. I'm trying to tell you, do your own research. Go out and look at the studies and don't just go blindly off what the AKA and what these advocacy groups are telling you. And there's been a few times where they've said, okay, thank you. Or I just want to cast some doubt, something in their minds where they go out and do their own research and say, there is another whole side here that says, don't do this. I want, when I talk to people and I just want people to know that it's not safe. It is harmful. Do your research. Just don't blindly go out and buy this stuff and take it and buy into what you're being told, because there are consequences. And we understand that there are a lot of people who have taken this. And these are the people who are mostly the most passionate people, or the ones who have taken it for years. And they say, this has helped me with all my pain and blah, blah, blah. And good for you. Maybe you're one of those people who your doctor said, you're not supposed to take this, but don't take more than 4 capsules a day, and don't take anything else. Don't take any extracts. Don't do anything else. Maybe you're one of those people who just take a couple and maybe it helps you, but it's not a safe product. And I feel every day it feels like I read more and more about people coming out and saying, because you were talking about Reddit. Reddit is where you read, please do not take this. Please do not take this. Do not take this. Do not take this. You can't get off this. This is worse than heroin. Do not take this. All of these people are not correct, and my son wasn't incorrect. He, I believe he was addicted to it, and he wanted to come off, and he had the same issues all those people are saying. Don't take this. Don't take this substance. It's harmful. It's addictive. You get a tolerance built up to it, and it's like any other actual opioids. And I hope all of those people will come out. And as time passes, I truly believe as time passes that we're going to see a lot more overdoses and deaths, because sometimes I've seen studies where people go to the hospital. They don't test them for kratom because they just see it as an overdose. So they'll hit them with Narcan and it helps them, and they send them home. They don't even know it was kratom. I feel as time passes that's I've got local recovery centers, treatment centers in my town and the next town over and other towns around. And I don't know how far in Ohio it is now. They didn't test for kratom before in routine drug tests. Now they do. I'm sure that there are a lot of people that aren't happy, because kratom's one of those things where you take it. Let's say you're an addict and you're going through rehab or something, and your job tells you have to do drug testing or whatever. You're taking kratom and you're getting drug tested and it's negative. You're like, okay, all my tests are negative. Now you got to test for kratom, so you're going to fail your drug test. So
Yeah, there's a lot of factors in this effort to try to normalize it. They don't want it to be seen as a drug, so that it's not, your job won't say that you can't do it, because what are they gonna test you for caffeine and then
right,
not let you do, because it's just like caffeine. But I think it's a quiet. I want to be actually wrong about this. I'm not hoping for this. I want to be proven wrong, but I do think it's an underreported thing. I think the industry says there's 15 million people. I think it's probably more like 3 to 5 million people that are doing it. And if there was actually 15 million people doing it, we'd see more incidences. And when it actually does get to where that's about 5% of the population, maybe if 20% or 30% of the people are doing kratom, there's just going to be a lot more news stories and bad incidences like this,
right.
especially in this lack of a regulatory environment that the industry is guarding the henhouse themselves. And I don't think a product like this should be self-regulated. Is there anything that we didn't touch on today that you want to make sure the audience hears before we say goodbye?
Just to reiterate, Austin was a very kind, loving, compassionate 25-year-old healthy kid. But he had a good job, went to work every day. So this is something that we didn't see. We totally went under radar. We were just living life like normal, like any normal family would. And you got this whole other side where you don't even realize it. If you have teenagers, talk to them, because I know that's on the uptick. I've been hearing it all over. It's the big thing. Teenagers, they're not carding people for this stuff. When the big thing starts happening and all these kids start hearing about it, what's this stuff? Oh, kratom, and if we get if they drug test us, it don't come up. No, I feel like it's going to get. I feel like it's going to blow up. I feel like that the number of users is going to just explode because of that. Once it gets out of what this does and what it can do with small amounts, with higher amounts, and I just feel like it lots with younger people that maybe they're taking marijuana or opiates or whatever they're doing, and they're drug tested at their work or whatever. I feel like the more and more the information that gets out, especially the information that's safe, that it's just going to explode. I really feel like the users is going to explode. I feel like the overdoses are going to explode. I feel like the deaths are going to explode. Just I want people to know that I am living proof that you can die from kratom toxicity, no matter what the AKA says, the advocacy groups. Do your own research, go out and research, look at the actual statistics, look at the actual cases that have happened, look at the $1 million lawsuits that have been won, and don't ask your kids, ask your teenagers, or if you yourself are taking kratom, and go research this stuff. Because if you research it and look at the bad stuff and not focus on the groups who say how great it is, you might really get shocked and tell yourself, I need to quit. I need to quit taking this and do something else. There's not a day that goes by that my wife and I, we don't think about Austin. He was our life. It's really sad that something like that can happen to anyone who doesn't even realize, and they don't know that it can happen to them. You got the people out here that are doing the fentanyl and all those drugs. They know they can die. They don't, they're not doing it to die, but they know that there's a chance to take an overdose and they can die. But you got the people like Austin who are taking this and they don't know. And then it just comes up and hits them like that. And then they're just gone. And it's so sad. It's not right. It's not fair. Just not. And anybody, if one person can hear your podcast and it helps them, or they say, "Oh my God, I found 3 bags in my son's room," and it can save someone, then that's mission accomplished.
I'm sorry that you lost Austin. There's probably no words I can say, but I do appreciate you taking the time, and I do think you will reach people, and we don't know how to help them. And our podcast is dedicated just to get the truth out there, because the major forces out there are singing a different tune than what we talk about at this podcast. So we just want to at least be one voice against this big industry. Thanks a lot, Dan.
You're very welcome. Just continue to we appreciate what you do. Just keep getting the word out there. We've reached out to our state senators and representatives, and I've called our Governor DeWine's office several times, and we want to just keep trying to get one person. It just takes one person to turn their head and say, "What's that? What happened?" And if we can just get that out and just get something happening, then that's what we want. And just one step at a time, and continue to try to get the word out and just makes things happen. So
Thanks.
you're very welcome. Have a good day.